You're late, Mom said, stepping onto the porch with her suitcase trailing behind her. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 6:02 a.m. 2 minutes late, man, I said, forcing a smile as I reached for the door handle. But before I could step out, I saw her. Lauren, my sister, strode out of the house, her own suitcase in tow, moving with the easy confidence of someone who had never been denied anything in her life. My smile frowned. What's going on? I asked, my voice carefully even. Mom turned to me, beaming like she had just dropped a bombshell. Oh, Violet, we decided Lauren should come instead of you. She's been so stressed lately, and she really needs this trip. My chest tightened. Instead of me, my voice rose despite myself. I've been planning this for years. I paid for everything. Mom waved a hand, as if brushing away a stray thought. We're grateful, sweetheart, really, but you're always working so hard. You can't take another trip later. Lauren needs this right now. Lauren didn't even have the decency to look guilty. She just smirked, shifting her weight onto one hip. Thanks for understanding, sis. Her tone dripped with insincerity. I turned to Dad as he shuffled out behind them, suitcase in hand. He avoided my eyes, his shoulders hunched in that familiar way that told me he wouldn't be standing up for me. This is unbelievable, I muttered, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Mom sighed, exasperated. Don't make this a big deal. Violet, your sister really needs a break. My name is Violet, and for the past 2 years, I've worked overtime, saving every spare penny to plan the perfect trip for my parents. Flights, luxury hotels, guided tours, I planned every detail. And now, as I stood in the driveway, watching Lauren climb into the back seat of my car like she belonged there, I realized something I'd been avoiding for years. It didn't matter how much effort I put in their eyes, Lauren would always come first. I swallowed hard, forcing a tight smile. Let's get going, then, I said flatly, yanking open the trunk. If they wanted to take Lauren instead of me, fine, but they weren't going to enjoy it. The drive to the airport was suffocating. Lauren chattered nonstop. Oh my gosh, man, did you see that TikTok about Paris? I can't wait to go shopping there. Do you think we'll have time, or will the tours take up the whole day? My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Mom chuckled. Of course we'll have time. We'll figure it out when we get there. I glanced at her in the mirror. When we get there. She didn't even notice. Dad cleared his throat. Thank you for driving us, Violet. I know this probably feels unusual, I said, meeting his gaze in the rearview mirror. He shifted uncomfortably. Right, Dad. Lauren leaned forward, resting her elbows on my seat. You're not mad, right? I mean, this is so big of you, letting me go. I could never afford this on my own. I clenched my jaw. Of course, Lauren, enjoy the trip. By the time we reached the airport, my patience was hanging by a thread. As I unloaded their luggage, Mom pulled me into a hug. Thank you for understanding, sweetheart. This means so much to us. And to Lauren? I nodded stiffly. Lauren beamed, flipping her hair over her shoulder. Thanks, Violet. You're the best. I watched them disappear into the terminal, my chest tight with anger. The drive home was a blur. Their words echoed in my head. Lauren needs this. You're always working so hard. You can't take another trip later. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat there in silence, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then, with steady hands, I marched inside, powered on my laptop, and logged into every travel account I'd used to book the trip. Hotel reservations cancelled, tours refunded, airline upgrades on. One by one, confirmation emails flooded my inbox. With each one, the tightness in my chest eased. They wanted to prioritize Lauren, fine, but they wouldn't be staying in 5-star hotels on my dime. They could explain themselves to the front desk in Paris. I was done being their doormat. The call started as soon as their flight landed. My phone buzzed relentlessly as I unpacked the suitcase I'd packed so carefully for a trip that was never mine. Mom's name flashed on my screen, accompanied by frantic texts. Violet, what's going on? The hotel won't let us check in. The reservation is missing. Call me immediately. This isn't funny. Fix this now. A laugh bubbled out of me before I could stop it. Fix this. They really thought I'd swoop in and save the day. My phone buzzed again. Lauren this time. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally listened, her voice was thick with entitlement. Violet, this is so petty. We're stuck here because of you. You need to call the hotel and fix it now. I rolled my eyes and deleted the message. 4 years, I'd been their fixer, the one who smoothed things over, the one who made everything work. Not anymore. Eventually, I picked up, just to put an end to the chaos. Violet, Mom's voice was sharp with panic. What did you do? The hotel says the reservation was cancelled. None of the tours are booked anymore. I let her rant before answering. Voice calm. I canceled them. Silence. Then, I furious as, why would you do that? I exhaled slowly. Oh, I don't know. Maybe because you decided to take Lauren on my trip. I let words sink in before adding, you're lucky I even drove you to the airport. We thought you'd understand, she snapped. Understand what? My voice rose. That 2 years of planning meant nothing. That my hard work didn't count because Lauren needed a break. Guess what, ma'am? I don't understand, and I don't care to. And then I hung up. Silence filled the room. For the first time in years, it felt good. I don't get why you're making this such a big deal. Just fix it already. Mom's voice crackled through the phone, her irritation clear. And then Dad, always the neutral one, we need to talk. This isn't right. I set the phone down, shaking my head. 4 years, I've been the one to patch things up, to smooth over every disagreement, to make sure everyone was happy and comfortable. Now that I stopped just once, Eddie had no idea what to do. I poured myself a cup of tea and Saturday at the kitchen table, letting the anger simmer in my chest. How dare they expect me to clean up their mess? How dare they act like I was the one in the wrong? Minutes passed before the phone rang again. This time, I answered. Violet, Mom's voice was sharp, cutting straight through my silence. This isn't funny anymore. We're stranded. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? I took a slow sip of my tea, relishing the small comfort it gave me. Embarrassing? I let out a humorless laugh. Try spending years planning, saving for every little detail, and then being told you're not even part of the trip you paid for. Stop being dramatic, she snapped. Lauren needed this more than you. I set my cup down, my voice firm, and now she can't figure it out. You made your choice, ma'am. You wanted to take Lauren instead of me. Fine, but don't expect me to fund our vacation. We're family, she hissed. We don't do this to each other. A bitter laugh slipped from my lips. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing. I could hear Lauren's voice in the background, whining, "Ma'am, just hang up on her. She's being impossible." That was the last straw. Enjoy your trip, I said, my voice ice cold. Oh, which you can't, because it's not your trip, it was mine, and now, it's nobody's. Goodbye. I hung up before she could respond and turned my phone off again. For the rest of the evening, I felt a strange mixture of anger and relief at how they put me in this position, but relief that I'd finally stood up for myself. They could call me dramatic all they wanted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't letting them take advantage of me. The next few days were blissfully quiet. With my phone off, I was finally able to breathe, to think clearly. I spent my mornings on the back porch, sipping coffee and relishing the calm I'd been craving for so long. My afternoons were filled with work, catching up on little projects that I had been putting off, things that reminded me how capable I was when I wasn't bogged down by their endless demands. But by the third day, my curiosity got the better of me. I turned my phone back on, only to find over a dozen voicemails waiting. The first few were from Mom, her frustration rising with each message. Violet, you need to call me back right now. This has gone too far. I can't believe you are doing this. You've humiliated us. We're your parents. How could you treat us this way? Then came Lauren's messages, dripping with entitlement. This is so petty. Even for you. You're ruining everything. Just fix it, Violet. And finally, Dad's quieter voice, his tone just as pointed. Violet, I don't understand what's happened to you. Call us back so we can sort this out. I hesitated before listening to the final voicemail. It was from Mom again, her voice, softer now, tinged with exhaustion. Violet, she began, we're back at the airport now. The trip is ruined, and I hope you're happy with yourself. Your sister is devastated, and your father and I are, well, disappointed doesn't even begin to cover it. Call us when you're ready to talk. I deleted every voicemail without replying. I wasn't ready to talk, and honestly, I wasn't sure I ever would be. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was the culmination of years of them, putting Lauren first, of treating my hard work as if it didn't matter, of expecting me to accept their disregard with a smile. As the hours passed, I found myself reflecting on all the times I'd been overlooked. Every holiday where Lauren's whims ruled the plans, every family gathering where my accomplishments were an afterthought. This trip had been the breaking point. The cracks had been forming for years. That evening, Grace dropped by unannounced, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a look of curiosity. I heard about what happened, she said, setting the cups down on the table. Your mom called me yesterday. Of course she did, I replied dryly. Mom had always been good at recruiting allies when she needed someone to guilt-trip me into compliance. And I told her, you were probably busy and would get back to her when you were ready, Grace said with a sly smile. I laughed, shaking my head. You're the best. No, she said seriously. You're the best, because you finally stood up for yourself. I know how hard that is. Violet, don't let them drag you back down. Her words stuck with me long after she left. Grace was right. I'd spent too long bending over backward to please people who never seemed to care about my efforts. It was time to break that cycle. By the time the weekend came around, I felt a strange clarity. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was accompanied by something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. Freedom from their expectations, freedom from being the family's fixer, freedom to live on my own terms. But, as expected, the silence didn't last. It was Sunday afternoon when I finally answered the phone. This time, it was Dad. Violet, he began, his voice heavy with weariness. Your mom wanted me to call. She thinks you'll listen to me. Go on, I said, leaning back in my chair. He let out a sigh. Look, this has all gotten out of hand. Your mom's upset, Lauren's furious, and it's just a mess, but you're better than this. I stiffened, his words igniting a fresh wave of anger. Better than what? Dad, standing up for myself, refusing to let you walk all over me again. That's not what I meant, he said quickly. It's just, you've always been the reasonable one who keeps everything together. This isn't like you. I laughed bitterly. You're right, it's not like me, because I'm not cleaning up your mess anymore. There was a pause, and for a moment, I thought he might finally understand. But then he said, you're punishing the whole family over one decision. Is that really fair? Fair, I repeated, my voice rising. Was it fair when you and Mom decided I wasn't important enough to be part of the trip I planned? Was it fair when you replaced me with Lauren, like I didn't matter? That's not what we were trying to do, he said defensively. We just thought Lauren needed it more. Of course you did, I snapped. You always think she needs more attention, more support, more of everything, and I'm always the one expected to sacrifice for her. Not anymore. The silence on the other end of the line was suffocating. Finally, he spoke, his voice distant. I don't know what you want me to say. I don't need you to say anything, I replied, my voice firm and steady. I just need you to understand that I'm done being the afterthought. From now on, I come first. Violet, goodbye, Dad said, and I ended the call, setting my phone down. My hands were shaking slightly, but it felt like I was finally breathing for the first time in years. The rest of the day was a blur of emotions, anger, sadness, and something else is something I hadn't felt in so long. Relief. It wasn't easy, but it felt like the start of something new. I wasn't the family's fixer anymore, and I wasn't going to be. They could clean up their own messes for once. When my parents and Lauren finally came back, I was already at their house, sitting in my car in their driveway, sipping coffee. The calm I'd felt these past few days hadn't left me. The moment I saw them step out of the taxi, dragging their suitcases, I felt that same sense of control. Lauren was the first to speak, her tone sharp. "Well, I hope you're happy, Violet." I raised an eyebrow, staying comfortably seated on the porch swing. "Happy about what?" "Our trip was a disaster," my mom said, waving her hand dismissively, like I had somehow orchestrated the entire thing. "We spent the entire week in dingy hotels, eating terrible food because we couldn't afford anything decent. And don't even get me started on the tours." Lauren crossed her arms. "Oh wait, there weren't any. Do you know how embarrassing it was to show up and be told there was no reservation?" I took another sip of my coffee. "Sounds rough," I said calmly. "But you wanted to take Lauren, right? I'm sure you had a lovely bonding experience." "That's not the point." Mom's voice was rising now, frustration bubbling over. "You knew we couldn't afford all the things you planned. You set us up to fail." I set my mug down gently and stood up, facing them. "No, ma'am, I didn't set you up for anything. I planned a trip for the three of us, something special I'd been saving for. You're the ones who decided to cut me out at the last second." Dad spoke up, his voice quieter but still pointed. "You didn't have to cancel everything, Violet." "That was extreme." "Was it?" I asked, folding my arms. "Why should I pay for a trip I wasn't even invited to? If Lauren needed it so badly, you should have planned it yourselves. You're lucky I didn't cancel the return flight." Lauren rolled her eyes. "You're so dramatic. It's just money, Violet." "And you're so entitled," I shot back, finally losing my patience. "Do you have any idea how much time, effort, and money went into planning that trip? Or do you just assume things magically happen because someone else does all the work?" They stood there, stunned, unsure of how to respond. I pressed on, my voice steady but resolute. "I've spent years being the responsible one who fixes everything, the one who makes sure it all runs smoothly. And for just as long, you've taken it all for granted. That's not fair." But my mom started, but I raised my hand to stop her. "No, ma'am," I said, cutting her off. "What's not fair is how you've treated me. You chose Lauren over me, like always, and I finally decided to stop being your doormat. You didn't want me on the trip, fine, but you don't get to enjoy the fruits of my labor without me." I grabbed my bag from the porch swing, turning to leave. "I'm glad you're back safely, but don't expect things to go back to the way they were. I'm done." As I walked toward my car, I could hear their voices calling after me, a mix of anger and guilt, but I didn't look back. The drive home felt strange peaceful, almost. 4 years, every visit to my parents' house had drained me emotionally, but this time, I felt light. I had finally said everything I'd been holding inside, and for once, I wasn't worried about their reactions. When I got back to my house, I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the couch, replaying the confrontation in my head. They had expected me to fold. They always did. But watching their stunned faces as I walked away was a reminder of how far I'd come. It didn't matter if they were angry, hurt, or embarrassed. I had taken control of my life, and I wasn't going back. The next day, Grace called. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "How'd it go?" I laughed, leaning against the kitchen counter, exactly like you'd imagine. "They're furious, Lauren's pouting, and Mom's probably working on her next guilt trip." Grace snorted. "Let her try. You've got a backbone now, and I'm here to make sure it stays in place." I grinned, feeling the warmth of her unwavering support. "Thanks, Grace. Seriously, you've been my rock through all of this." "Anytime," she replied, her voice softening. "So, what's next for you now that you're not playing family fixer anymore?" That question had been lingering in my mind since the confrontation. What was next? For so long, I'd been focused on meeting everyone else's expectations. Now that I was free from that, I felt a little lost, but also empowered. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but for the first time in years, I get to decide. Not them, not anyone else, just me." Grace's voice was full of warmth. Sounds like the start of something amazing. I smiled, the weight of the past few weeks lifting just a little more. In the weeks that followed, I began to make small changes that felt monumental. I said no more often, and for the first time, it didn't make me feel guilty. I started investing more time in the things I wanted to do, and I didn't look back. I redecorated my living room, swapping out the hand-me-down furniture my parents had given me for pieces that felt like mine, modern, comfortable, and vibrant, just like the life I was finally creating. Weekends were spent exploring local cafes and parks, places I had always meant to visit but had never made time for. I started journaling, writing down my thoughts and dreams without filtering them through the lens of anyone else's expectations. Each small step felt like reclaiming a part of myself that I hadn't realized had been lost. One evening, I opened the spreadsheet I'd used to plan the family trip. The cancelled reservations Saturday on the screen, an echo of past disappointments, but instead of regret, I felt determination. That money had been meant for a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I wasn't going to let it go to waste. I closed the spreadsheet and opened a new tab, Solo Travel Ideas. A few weeks later, I booked a solo trip to Italy. It wasn't the trip I had planned for them, and it wasn't about proving anything anymore. This was for me chance to celebrate my independence, a step toward putting myself first. When I landed in Rome, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. I had never traveled alone before, but as I stepped into the warmth of the Italian air, the bustling city stretching out before me, I knew I had made the right decision. I spent my days wandering cobblestone streets, marveling at ancient ruins, and savoring meals in little cafes with no schedule to follow. There was no one else to consider, just me and the freedom to explore on my own terms. One afternoon, sitting on the Spanish steps with gelato in hand, I pulled out my journal. For years, I had written about what I wanted to achieve, but those dreams were always tangled with the hopes of making someone else proud. Now, as I wrote, the focus shifted: learn a new language, start a small business, travel to at least 5 more countries. The list grew, each goal reflecting the life I wanted, the one I had been expected to live. On my last night in Florence, I had dinner at a small family-run restaurant overlooking the Arno River. As the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a deep, quiet peace settle over me. This trip had been more than a vacation, it had been a turning point. Here, thousands of miles away from everything familiar, I realized something crucial. I didn't need anyone's approval to be enough. I was enough, just as I was. When I returned home, my parents reached out again, this time, their tone softer, more measured. "Hope you had a nice trip," my mom texted. "Maybe we can all talk soon." I stared at the message for a moment, then set my phone down. I wasn't ready to reply yet, and that was okay. This time, things would happen on my terms. As I unpacked my suitcase and placed the souvenirs on my shelves, I felt a surge of pride. A week after returning, my mom called. This time, I answered. "Hi, Violet," she said, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. "How was your trip?" "It was amazing," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, careful not to give too much away. "That's good to hear," she said, pausing. "We've been thinking a lot about what happened. Maybe we handled things poorly." The admission was unexpected, but I wasn't ready to let them off the hook. "Poorly? You replaced me on a trip I planned and paid for without even asking. Poorly is an understatement." "I know," she said quietly. "Your dad and we didn't realize how much it would hurt you." "And Lauren?" I asked. "Does she feel bad too? Or is she still blaming me for ruining her vacation?" "She's upset," my mom admitted, "but I think she knows she could have handled things better." I sighed, leaning against the counter. "Ma'am, this wasn't just about the trip. It's about years of putting Lauren first and expecting me to pick up the slack. I'm not doing it anymore." "I understand," she said after a pause. "We're going to try to do better. We don't want to lose you." Her words hit me somewhere deep, but I knew better than to let guilt creep in. "I'm glad to hear that," I said, voice steady, "but it's going to take more than words to fix this. I need to see real effort." not just apologies. You will, she promised. We'll give you the space you need, but I hope you'll let us back in someday. After the call ended, I felt a swirl of emotions, relief that they were finally acknowledging their actions, and doubt about whether they'd actually change. But then I realized something important: whether or not they changed wasn't my responsibility. For the next few months, I held my ground. I responded to their calls and messages when I felt like it, but I didn't go out of my way to fix things or smooth over old wounds. I focused on building my own life. I signed up for photography class, something I'd always dreamed of doing but never had time for. I joined a local hiking group, started planning my next solo trip, and took up hobbies that felt authentic to me. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I realized just how far I'd come. I wasn't the person who bent over backward for people who didn't appreciate me. I was someone who valued herself, who set clear boundaries, and who wasn't afraid to stand up for what she deserved. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free.